Welcome to this second week's prerequisite on hashtag how to run for mayor, the grandfather clause. Come along with us as we explore the etymology, foundation, and culture of a city on the bluff.
Second prerequisite. Etymology, foundation, and culture. It ought to be prerequisite of those campaigning for office and his/her subordinates in this or any city that the where, why, and what be apparent as the who and when is us and now. There are probably hundreds or thousands named Henry, but here is where I reside to make our community a better home for all. We must ask ourselves what is in a name where dialogue in Plato's Cratylus sheds more light on how we may better understand this chapter. We are either given a name as inheriting one, or we name according to behavior or characteristics observed in the person or thing. The same is so when naming communities, towns, cities, or municipalities. When paying taxes, one sees a standard of living set by the services insured by the people and gladly contributes to garbage removal or water purity levels. What is it that we live in civilly and socially as we see each other as contributing to a similar cause where mutual benefit is received? The ancient Greek philosopher Hermogenes states in a Platonic dialogue, but there is a natural correctness of names, which is the same for everyone, Greek or foreigner. Cratylus 383b, with many different subcultures making up our community's foundation, recognizing the ratio of those dominate, we consider biology last of all because no one would believe themselves ethically bad. The majority attempting to stop progress might be better only directed as the namesake of this city is from the Egyptian one of the same. Memphis has meaning in Egyptian and Greek, but its foundation may be more so from the will of its majority, but the culture in time and space would render the masses subservient.
The city of Memphis in Egypt is known as Road of the Ram-Headed Sphinxes, but by Greek translation to Men-Nefer, it gets its meaning of enduring and beautiful. Cratylus says in the Platonic dialogue of his name, the simple truth is that anyone who knows a thing's name also knows the thing. Cratylus 435d, from the ancient city of the same name, Memphis draws its proximity to the Mississippi Delta as justification for its taking the name. The ancient city became the capital of Egypt during the Old Kingdom, which lasted 8 consecutive dynasties. The ancient city hit an apex during the 6th of its 8 dynasties as the center of worship for Ptah, the god of creation, craftsmen, and architects. His consort Sekhmet, a warrior goddess, and son Nefertum, a lotus flower, made up their triad of theology, determining how people understood the world, guided their moral behavior, and defined what ethical goodness was, were explained through some aspect of the Trinity. With this understanding, the people of Egypt governed themselves autonomously, as had those of African descent that resided in a city on the bluff without a name. When European Americans chartered the city in 1819, the population only included those who willingly paid property tax, but in the wilderness of North America there were many more than masters and slaves. The area drew all types to its safety and prosperity, but as the need to regulate progress, Congress was to collect taxes, but from what other than residents. Calling one or more Memphian is consequently a compliment to those of African descent, recognizing the inclination to civil behavior prior to state or federal jurisdiction.
The foundation of commerce was centered around the physical ability of involuntary laborers as king cotton, and its distribution was not a local or state matter. It was federal, as the economic ecosystem depended on the supply from the region. Hermogenes explains, for example, when we give names to our domestic slaves, the new ones are as correct as the old. No name belongs to a particular thing by nature, but only because of the rules and usage of those who establish the usage and call it by that name. Cratylus 385d, after the Revolution, land unsettled was Indian territory, and whereas the Treaty of Tuscaloosa in 1818 between the Chickasaw ceded West Tennessee to the U.S., it became a territory. Since Hernando de Soto in 1541 and until its founding in 1819, the residents who would become Memphian nurtured a tradition of prosperity that John Overton, James Winchester, and Andrew Jackson felt owed taxes to our new nation. Besides its location on the Mississippi, the concentration of workforce seeking the American dream, some would say, had more of an ability to move volumes necessary to meet demands.
A public culture typical of plantation life extended to agricultural distribution ports on the river, as European Americans held ownership of the bulk of products, where above all was king cotton. The port city off the Mississippi was soon being bisected east/west by a train with a labor force believed more naturally qualified to handle a greater load. Socrates states, and the better painters produce finer products or paintings, while the others produce inferior ones. Similarly with builders, Cratylus 429a, well, in building cities cultures are multiple, but usually two main parties distinguish themselves, in this instance master and slave, as Overton, Winchester, and Jackson saw the world then. But there has always been a brighter side of Memphis, where if whether or not one is more economically fortunate, character defines the relative world we live in, and stature places organizational hierarchy above economics. What is a dollar to a king but an insult, as any royal product or service is worth more than those not for the same reasons that a child whose father and mother were married is somehow held in higher regard. A father having trained a son is the further benefit of wisdom. Proverbs 3, none may deny that they wouldn't prefer. So, kings of castles as residents of what is now Memphis but once was not, as Hickory Hill was annexed, Soto was residents' property by culture.
Memphis etymology, foundation, and culture are uniquely characteristic of its people, who at that time may have not cared to fill out their census forms, or may have even been royalists or even another administration. It wasn't only black and white back then. There were a lot of nationalities, as the United States was fragile once. But Socrates asks, what caused each of the things that are to be called by a name? Isn't it whatever gave them their names? Cratylus 416c, Hermogenes agrees.
That concludes the information for this week. Tune in next Tuesday for the third prerequisite on early history, commerce, and the state. Thank you for your time and consideration.